Hello, hello, Jordan Chariton live. Status Coup, second time today. We were live earlier from the Free Assange protest outside the United Kingdom or UK consulate in New York City. So John Farina was live. Susan Sarandon spoke there among a lot of the usual Assange supporters that we have covered over the years. I think we've covered at this point, over 10 events on behalf of Assange in New York and DC. Obviously, we're going to get into today, kicked off the final appeal in the United Kingdom. This was the first day of what's expected to be 2 or 3 days in the United Kingdom. It's actually, let me rephrase, it is Assange's attempt to get judges to grant him an appeal. So it's not the actual appeal. It is him trying to get the United Kingdom to grant him one last appeal in this Banana Republic political persecution against him. Today, Julian Assange's lawyers gave their case. Tomorrow, the United Corporations of America will give its case. We will have Kevin Gotstola. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I always butcher it. But Kevin has been the leading journalist, I think, in America covering the Assange case. So we'll have him on tomorrow. He will be able to talk about America's, air quotes, case that America will present in court tomorrow. So we'll get into Assange's case today. Also a very illuminating moment captured by a really, really deplorable British Zionist at the Assange event today. Just, I'll tell you, Steve, a lot of old white guys keep passing pro-Palestinian protests, now Assange events, saying really, really horrible, bigoted shit. So we'll get into that. Also, Nancy Pelosi, I don't know if it is early senility or just she's a sociopathic liar, but she had quite a statement to make about how the U.S. hasn't given Israel one iota of weapons since October 7th. I mean, for all the media hyperventilating about Trump lying every second, which is true, these people lie as much as they breathe. Oh my God. I couldn't even believe that Pelosi clip. You know, I'm not like a body language reader, and I usually can detect bullshit. It's very hard to tell. I'm not trying to make a blanket statement on all older people, but it's very hard to tell with her if she actually just believes this shit or if she's lying. We'll get to that.
She's a trained liar. Her lips are moving. She's lying.
Yes. Also, later we're going to have a guest. Did you know that in the, fascism is not only on the federal level, it's also on the state and local level. Did you know that the city of Houston was handing out tickets to activists passing out food to the homeless? Yes, this was happening in Houston. So much so that the activists had to sue the city. So we now have a ruling. So we're going to have an activist on. Bless the United States legal system. They are now ending the ticketing of activists for feeding the homeless in America. So we'll have somebody from Houston, food, not bombs, later. So that kind of ties into the military-industrial complex. And I will kindly ask everyone, I was just telling Steve and Colin earlier, listen, I just keep it real. Times are slow right now. We could use a little injection financially. If you've been looking on your internet screen, if you were a Status Coup viewer, we're still out there. We were just in East Palestine. We've been covering well over 30, let me repeat, over 30 of these ceasefire now protests. I'm hoping it's going to be this weekend. We'll be going back to Flint. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Costs money. And if we're not signing up members or at least getting donations, we're not going to be able to keep the lights on because, Steve, I can't print money. I don't have the MMT muscle like the federal government. So if we spend more money than we bring in, or at least don't break even, it's hard to pay people and keep the lights on. Just so you know, obviously we pay John for his great on-the-ground work, but just to broadcast our live streaming unit, that costs us. It depends on how much we go live because then you have data. So, right, we've been using more than our data plan to air. John, God bless him, was live for 4 hours yesterday covering the Queen's protest. I don't know how he does it. my back can't do 4 hours anymore. I'm lucky if I can make it 2 without, dying. Anyway, it costs money. It costs us between $500 and $1,000 a month just to live stream using our live view and then paying John and everything else. So please, please, please support us if you are not. StatusCoup.com/join, $5 to $10 a month. And if you're already a member, please, please make a donation. You can super chat if you want, but donations, we get all of it. That's StatusCoup.com/donate. I'll ask you kindly again later in the show. And for whoever is asking about me shaving, I will. But I am on the third round of edits now on my book. And it's killing me. So I haven't had much time to pee, shave. It's been tough. I'm raising.
Why do you need to shave? Why shave, man?
I think it looks good, but somebody made a comment. Anyway, smash the like button, share this live stream, and public service announcement. This Thursday, our Status Coup members call, 7:30 Eastern time. So if you are not yet a Status Coup member, now's the time. Sign up, StatusCoup.com/join. Colin, are we still doing it on Zoom or some other way?
It'll be another way. I'll when we get closer, I'll explain more detail. Okay. It'll be nothing they have to really do different. It'll just be a different link you guys get essentially.
Okay. Hopefully another way that works. Let's put that out there. So sign up, StatusCoup.com/join. I'll remind you all about this halfway through the show. All right. Let's start. Listen, Steve, there's a lot going on, and I take pride, and I think Real Progressives goes along with this too. We take pride in covering things that the mainstream media has long abandoned. And I think I think you have covered the Assange political persecution for years. This is kind of it. I don't think if it gets sent to America, we'll cover it. We'll cover the trial, but I would not be optimistic that would be a fair trial, no matter how much protest happens in America. Thank you. Syed just signed up as a new member. So thank you, Syed, for heeding the call. Really appreciate that. We need it. We cannot. This stuff is really expensive to go on the ground. That's why so few do. And it costs us a lot of money to continue doing this. It would have been a lot easier for us to sell out and take money from Democratic Party donors, Republican Party donors, or other corporate suspects. We have chosen not to for 5 years. We plan on not taking their money, never taking their money. And that's why we kindly ask you support us if you can. But honestly, I think that what you're seeing now with Assange, and again, today was day one of at least his final appeal, his attempt to get an appeal. I think it ties in with everything we've been talking about: the genocide in Israel, the fascism in America, the normalization of American war crimes by our media and politicians in both parties. And I think, honestly, what you're seeing in terms of the media basically saying deal with it in terms of what Israel is doing is why they hate Assange. Because Assange, very, very against kind of the usual code of media, he put it out there for the world to see over a decade ago. And I think that is why Obama, due to the fact that he at least was like, the president of Harvard and kind of believed in some form of laws, not all of them, he rightly so said, we're not going to prosecute Julian Assange. We can't, because if we prosecute Assange, then technically the New York Times, Washington Post, other outlets that the White House loves and they leak to all the time would be in jeopardy too. I want to play the lawyer for Julian Assange just explaining kind of what they presented today in court. Again, we'll have Kevin Gotstola tomorrow to dissect America's case against Assange. But let's play one of Assange's lawyer give a brief recap on what they presented.
All of the arguments presented here today by Julian's lawyers would in itself suffice in a normal country to stop the extradition. There are so many arguments, I'm not going to be able to repeat all of them.
So we're joined now by Jen Robinson, a member of Julian Assange's legal team. Jen, could you give us an overview of what happened today in the court?
Today we heard the arguments from our side, from Julian's side, from both Ed Fitzgerald KC and Mark Summers KC, outlining our grounds of appeal. We heard about the US-UK extradition treaty point, which is that this extradition request is for espionage, which is a political offence, and that's prohibited by the terms of the treaty. So the very treaty that provides the basis for this extradition request prohibits the kind of request that's been made for Julian. We say that that's unlawful under international law, and that it constitutes an abuse of process, an abuse of this court's process for the US to knowingly make a request which is prohibited by the terms of the treaty. We then heard arguments about the Article 10 aspects of this case. Of course, Mark Summers took us through the issues related to Chelsea Manning and the fact that Chelsea Manning's conduct in releasing this information to WikiLeaks would be protected by free speech protections and whistleblower protections under European court jurisprudence, and therefore that what Julian did as a publisher in receiving and publishing this material was also protected acts. So it would be a grave violation of his right to free speech if he's extradited to the United States. We also
I want to stress, Steve, and get your thoughts, because I think the term international law, like those like us and those watching, like believe it, because law should be applied, but the United States and the United Kingdom apparently don't. Australia, up until very recently, apparently didn't, because they didn't come to Julian Assange's defense. His own country, up until recently, politicians have been finally doing the right thing. But what she said, and I also want to read, this is from Edward Snowden tweeted this. It might seem in the weeds, but this is a big reason why this should have never happened. Edward Snowden tweeted earlier today, the outrageous part of the UK's years-long, quote, trial to condemn Julian Assange to die in an American dungeon is that the victim of his crime, i.e. journalism, is a state rather than a person. The definition of a political offense, which is the US-UK's extradition treaty, explicitly forbids. The United Kingdom and the US have an extradition treaty that forbids extraditing basically for political reasons. I don't know what more political reason you could get other than this guy exposed war crimes of the United States, and it's been exposed that the Trump administration plotted to kidnap and assassinate him.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to the beginning. I mean, they have blamed everything on this guy, from Hillary's loss to, sun rising, and the moon coming up too. I mean, they have blamed everything on this guy. And I remember way back when he released everything, that, it was like a daily dump. Everybody was pouring through these things. We learned more about our government, more about what's happening back in the back room than I think any of us ever had any clue about. Here we are now. I mean, the idea of international law, first of all, who actually is there to enforce international law? It's a handshake agreement between countries, because there's no real meaningful arbiter of international law. I mean, they can thumb their nose at anything they want. As long as they're not the U.S., they have a chance of the U.S. bombing them. But the reality is that who's going to actually enforce it? This is all politics once again. And this guy who revealed the inner workings of not only the DNC, but a lot of other military stuff that really should never have happened. I hate the fact that he's taken like a cult-like figure, but I love the fact that people are aware that we have literally zero freedom of the press right now. And Julian Assange, if he gets extradited to the U.S., put in a dungeon here in the U.S., you can pretty much close the door on the concept of freedom of the press. It will be non-existent at that point.
Well, I want to make the point, and we're going to play a clip from CNN, which honestly, we'll get to that later. We'll get to that in a minute. It was just, you can't make this shit up. You don't know if they're just full throttle lying or they just forgot because they haven't been covering this for so long and they just abandoned it. But I want to make the point. The very people, Rachel Maddow, most of CNN, New York Times, to the New York Times credit, at least last year, they came out with 4 European outlets saying that the United States should drop the extradition. A little late. They should have came out about 10 years ago and said the U.S. should end this. They should have came out when Trump's DOJ indicted him in the first place. But all these people loved WikiLeaks back in 2010, 2011, 2012, they loved Julian Assange. Why? Because he was revealing the war crimes of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. So even when they were on principle against U.S. war crimes, it was partisan. It was tribal. It was because a Republican was the president. But in 2016, when WikiLeaks released the Podesta leaks, which was Hillary's emails, which, by the way, I do believe was a leak. It would take too long. I still don't think there was any evidence that those were hacked emails. If they were, why wouldn't the DNC allow the FBI to look at their server? Doesn't make sense. If they were hacked, why is it that this was not mentioned on Rachel Maddow or MSNBC? The CEO of CrowdStrike, which was the DNC security consultant that they hired for all this, testified in Congress, not publicly, that they did not have any evidence that the data was actually exfiltrated from the DNC. It was just that they basically believe so, but it wasn't hard evidence. Anyway, I think if whoever leaked it to WikiLeaks didn't leak it to WikiLeaks, I think it would have got out somehow. I do think it was a leak. Anyway, they loved Assange. So did a lot of the original resistance reporters. The original resistance was against Bush. Remember back in the glory days of the Huffington Post, Mother Jones, Daily Kos. We're talking like over a decade ago. Salon. They were big WikiLeaks fans, big Assange fans. But because he took down Queen Hillary, which we've already gone through, was not the case at all. Hillary took down Hillary by running a horrible campaign, having no economic message, and a lot of other reasons. Then there's silence of the lambs. You never hear from the media about this. Brian Stelter, when he was at CNN, Mr. Reliable Sources, wasn't talking about this. I mean, there's a lot of crimes going on around the world against journalists. There's journalists being killed. There's journalists being unfairly persecuted. And there's probably a lot of them I don't know and you don't know about. But I can't think about one that it doesn't matter. Maybe you don't like Julian Assange. Maybe you don't like his motives. Maybe whatever. You don't like him for other reasons. It doesn't matter. It's about the core principle of he did what the New York Times routinely does. He did what Washington Post has done. And by the way, if he is brought here and found guilty, it's open season. Because what happens then if, a lot of my reporting, for example, I obtained confidential documents, for example, from the Flint criminal investigation. I didn't do anything illegal to obtain them. They were, I won't get into details, but let's just say I obtained them through normal journalistic means. But if this is normalized that you could go after and imprison a journalist for publishing documents that were leaked to them, they could do it against anyone. And I don't have the New York Times to back me up. I don't have the lawyers of the New York Times. I'm an independent journalist with, super chats and members to back me up. You think I'd be able to defend myself? Not that they would go after me like Assange, because they don't care about Flint like they do exposing war crimes. But you get the point. If this is normalized, it's open season, mostly, I would say, against freelance journalists, independent journalists, and journalists from adversarial outlets that the United States does not like. But I want to play this clip, Steve, because I also think this represents a big part of this problem. I had CNN on this morning and 300 people watching, so smash the like button, please. Super chats are welcome. And CNN did their coverage of, the most important press freedom case probably this century. And it was about 2 minutes. And notice if you see anything wrong in this clip. Let's play it, Colin.
What is Assange's argument for not being extradited to the U.S.?
There are several. One of them at the most basic level is that he has some mental health issues and a concern that he may take his life if he's moved to the US to face trial. Another is that this is politically motivated. He was just a journalist doing his job, so it would breach his human rights if he was transferred to the US. Quite extraordinary claim now coming in just in the last hour or so that his lawyers have presented to the court. obviously, we need to investigate this further, but this is always all presented in open court. According to Assange's lawyer, there is compelling evidence now in existence that senior CIA and US administration officials requested a detailed set of plans and drawings of the embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy. You'll remember he was holed up in for all of that time. And they are suggesting that President Trump at the time himself requested options, and sketches were even drawn up. When we're talking about options, the legal team is basically suggesting that there was evidence of a CIA plot to kidnap or assassinate Julian Assange. These are extraordinary claims.
Well, there are a lot of new details coming out. And again, those accusations have to be verified and looked through.
Keywords. Just in this hour, mate. Just in this hour, new explosive claims are coming out. Yes, just in this hour of the year 2021. Now, 3 years ago, these claims came out. Yahoo News. Hate to credit, corporate media, but this was Yahoo News. Michael Isikoff and a couple others. Kidnapping, assassination, and a London shootout inside the CIA's secret war plans against WikiLeaks. This was exposed 3 years ago. And what you just saw on CNN, again, I don't want to be naive. It's quite possible they truly believe this just came in and is breaking news, because they haven't been covering this for, 7 to 10 years. They don't care. So they might have just forgot. It was really only Yahoo News. And even though it's Yahoo News, which is part of kind of corporate mainstream media, CNN, MS, Fox, NYT, they didn't really pick that up. 20 years ago, that might have been a big, big deal that we just learned that the CIA had plotted under the president's orders to kidnap and assassinate someone like Julian Assange. But I truly believe, maybe they truly believed that it was brand new information because they haven't given a shit and they haven't been following this. But I'm going to go with the opposite. They know it's been out there and they just want to feign ignorance. But at the end of the day, how in the world, there's two problems here. Number one, they're lying to their audience and presenting this like it was, Julian Assange's lawyers just stumbled upon this information in the final hour. But just secondly, why this is why I always say we cannot allow the normalization of Americans getting poisoned by their government, police surveilling peaceful protesters and killing peaceful protesters, journalists and publishers being prosecuted. Why was it normalized in the first place? It should have been case closed once that story came out. Prosecution dropped. We have evidence that this is all politics and they want to murder the man, assassinate the man. That should be in the United Kingdom's legal system. Case closed. We're dropping this. It should be in the United States legal system. The Democrats and their fucking, authors of their fundraising emails. Democracy's at stake. Okay, well, you could have said they could have used it as a political campaign weapon. Trump tried to assassinate Julian Assange, or plotted to, before calling it off. Whatever happened, they could have used it against Trump if they wanted, even though they probably didn't care. Remember, Hillary Clinton years ago joked about, if a drone falls on him. But am I in the twilight zone? Do you think CNN just forgot that this has been out there for years?
Now, you know what? I think, let me take a step back. I think that when you consider the fact that someone is terrified to come to the U.S. for justice, for a court hearing, they're terrified of being extradited. That's got to tell you something right there, how far from the good guys we are on this period. The idea that someone in particular covering mass violations of human rights and war crimes and electioneering and all kinds of bullshit that the DNC did. This right here is big news that the American people should know. But alas, they don't know. So when you look at these groups that are fronts, let's be fair, they are literal arms of empire. They're arms of these political parties. They are the mouthpieces for these political parties. It doesn't take much to realize that they need to put this in the best light to make it seem like, oh my goodness, here's this thing. Because what's happening right now? You're about to enter into an election season. So why not suddenly bring this stuff out like it's new information? Because if you beat the dead horse, nobody's going to take it seriously. But them coming out like, this just in, gets people's short-term memory reignited, and they're like, oh my God, they did this. Okay. Now I'll put it to you in a little bit deeper form. The vote blue sycophant, the standard corporate Democrat, the one that doesn't know any better, that arps like a seal when they say arp like a seal, those folks. When you say don't normalize, don't let these things become normal. In talking right now just about genocide, they're saying, yes, but we've got to defend our freedoms. What do you want, Trump? I'm not even joking. That's how far we have gotten from any kind of a sane population. So these kinds of news outlets, when they put this stuff out there, are counting on those kind of lemmings who still are protecting Hillary Clinton, who are still protecting Barack Obama, who are still only focused on Donnie Tiny Hands and his court hearing in New York City, where he's got 300 and some or 400 and some million dollars in fines. This is the big news to them. This is their world. It's in and they know that. So with Assange coming over here, the idea of being able to trigger something that would somehow or another be bad on Trump or whatever, I mean, that's just like manna from heaven. And they understand that that's going to spread like a wildfire.
Well, there's also a rank, not surprisingly, hypocrisy to all this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, all these outlets, I mean, they might as well have they might as well fly, if they find his body, they might as well fly Navalny's body over and, give him what they give presidents, lie him out in the opening in the Capitol. They're so distraught over Navalny. It seems he was killed in prison on the orders of Putin. But if they're so aghast, MSNBC is in tears over this, and CNN, and everybody is in tears, the establishment at least, over Navalny being assassinated. They call him a hero. I don't really know enough about him, but from what I've seen, he seemed like a nationalist to me. I don't condone Putin. I don't condone Putin, eliminating his political opponents, but we should be honest about who he was. But what's the difference between what Russia did and Putin did with Putin and what Trump and now Biden are doing with Assange? What is the difference? Assange is, jailing him. He was a political opponent of Russia. So what is the difference? That WikiLeaks and Assange are clearly a political opponent to the military-industrial complex. Clearly, I would go further than an opponent. I mean, he is really the most adversarial media that has exposed American war crimes in this century. And what did they do? I mean, they've jailed him, tortured him, mental health, his physical health is withering away. And now they're basically pushing the UK to rubber stamp his death sentence. Because if he comes here, it's not if, it's when.
I gotta say, when you think about media in general, the job of the media is to cover the news, not create news, but to cover the news, to cover what is actually happening out there. And when you think about the role that Julian Assange played, he just reported what was given to them. This was kind of the whole WikiLeaks angle here. I don't know that he sought to bring down the U.S. empire. I don't know that he sought to bring down Hillary Clinton. I don't know that he sought to do any of that. What I do know is he took the information he had and he curated and put it out there for the world to see. So him being an enemy is, do you think Woodward and Bernstein started out, maybe they were enemies of Nixon? I don't know. But at the end of the day, they went ahead and covered the news. They went for the story. They found the story. They found the smoking gun and they chased it down. Does that make him an enemy of Nixon, or does that make them a good journalist doing journalistic work, that following the story where the story takes them? So to me, I don't see that. I see them crafting this because they got embarrassed. They got spanked. They got shown for what they are publicly to the world. And that wasn't part of the narrative. That broke the Truman Show narrative that they had going on. The USA good guys, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I have a hard time seeing how they're somehow or another managing in some sectors of the world to make Julian Assange out to be some sort of a criminal, which is just ridiculous, because there are people that actually, especially Democrats, who think that Julian Assange is in fact a criminal. Insane. Yeah. Pure insanity.
Absolutely. I want to play his wife, Stella Assange's comments outside the courthouse today, which stressed the CIA's role in all this.
So today was a day of legal arguments, but really what it was an indictment of a rogue agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, which it pops up in each of the arguments. Whether it was Julian exposing their torture program and their involvement in illegal killings, or their own plots to murder him. Throughout, the origin of this prosecution came about when the CIA head, Mike Pompeo, lost the plot. He lost the plot, and then he instrumentalized his agency to go after a media organization, to plot the murder of a journalist, and to imprison a publisher in London. They lost the plot. It is rogue, it is out of control, and now it is targeting the press. Whatever happens in the coming days, it's now been aired in court. The murder plot, the political motivation coming out of Mike Pompeo's obsession with killing Julian, and the murders that Julian exposed in Iraq and Afghanistan, the torture program.
I think that is a really, really well put way of saying all this. I also think, why isn't it we've never heard that from any journalist in the United States? Well, on the mainstream media. Because that's not like opinion, what she's saying. That's not like an advocate. I mean, it's his wife, so obviously she's advocating. But that's just the facts. I mean, those are the facts. They lost the plot. Pompeo was obsessed with killing him. And I think this shows a broader lesson, Steve, before we move on. We're in a presidential election year, but at the end of the day, the president does not run America. I don't want to get into the deep state, but there is a deep state. Go ask John F. Kennedy and RFK. And if you piss off the deep state, they will make the presidential decision for the president. Because Obama, to his credit, I give credit where credit is due, decided not to prosecute Julian Assange. And the CIA did not like that. And the FBI did not like that. And all the apparatus that were steaming mad. Think like the modern day Alan Dulles. You know, Alan Dulles was like, I think, behind JFK's offing. But think of all the tools and ghouls and spooks of modern day in the deep state, CIA, FBI, DHS. They were just itching. All right, once Obama's out, hopefully we could, play the next guy. And Trump, for all the many reasons not to like him, I think the people around him were a lot more dangerous than Trump. John Bolton, Rex Tillerson, a lot of the people Trump appointed. And I think Trump said, okay, whatever, do whatever you want. Because the CIA obviously was pissed off that Obama didn't go after him. And I think Biden, to a certain degree, just ceded to what the CIA wanted, which was continuing this prosecution. So I think this is as much about, we could blame it on Trump and Biden, but I think this is the CIA getting their guy, because they care less. They're never going to be introspective. They're never going to look and say, well, maybe we did the wrong thing here in Afghanistan, Iraq. Maybe we shouldn't have, dropped bombs on those Reuters journalists and innocent people that Julian Assange exposed. They want to get the guy that dares to question and, much worse, expose what we do.
I got to tell you, man, anytime you talk about the deep state, it conjures up conspiracies and stuff like that. But the reality is that most of government isn't a 4-year job. Most of the people in all these different agencies are there for life. It's deep state is just you can take away the cloak and dagger deep state word and just say career government employees, people that have worked in high, impact, the FBI, the CIA. I mean, I know people from the FBI that were born into it. Mom and dad were in there, and then the kids came in through there. There's family secrets throughout that whole damn thing. Ultimately, those are the folks that are really making decisions. Think about Biden. What of all the things going on in the world right now, how many of them do you think Biden could actually keep in his brain at one time? I mean, for real, the man is severely diminished. And I want to say something else too. Just because I'm particularly critical of the Democrats does not mean I like the Republicans. I fucking hate there's a meme out there where Samuel Jackson's giving you the look. It's like that look what happens when you're cutting down on Democrats and a Republican comes up and goes, yeah, and you're like, stop fucking talking to you. The idea here is stand up for the right things, period, at all times. And if the Democratic Party is doing things that are evil, call it evil. Don't sit there and sponsor genocide, for fuck's sake. And what Julian Assange did, celebrate that stuff because you're a citizen. You're not a Democrat or a Republican. You're a human being. Know what your government's doing. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
And on that note, I think we should not let him get a pass because, I mean, I don't vote for whoever you want, but let's be clear. Trump initiated this prosecution.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Biden has continued it, so you can put them both together.
That
But
Trump, right there tells
Trump initiated this, and we should not let Trump get a pass. Whether he did it because he actually had a belief that Julian Assange deserved it, or he just let his CIA people take over, doesn't matter. Trump initiated this, and Biden's continuing it. Before we move on to Nancy Pelosi's outrageous lies, we got almost 500 people watching. Public service announcement Thursday night. 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific is our monthly members call. So if you are a Status Coup member, put it in your calendar and smoke it, baby. 7:30 Eastern time, 4:30 Pacific, our monthly members call. If you're not a member, sign up for $5 to $10 a month, and you will get the link about a half hour. Usually we email you the link, or if you are a member through YouTube, we post it on our community tab. But it's always a lot of fun. Talk, questions, comments, concerns. Maybe I'll give you the latest update on my book, We the Poisoned, which will be out in August. I now have a date. It will be out in August. And the pre-order will be available months before that. And also, I'll be able to tell you about my plans to shoot a mini documentary in Flint coming up. Bottom line, I'm going to ask you one more time. I'll take the glasses off. We need your help. We do not have any money coming from the remaining Koch brother. We do not have any money coming from George Soros. We have no money coming from the DNC, the RNC, the corporate fat cats. It takes a lot of money to continue traveling to East Palestine, Flint. We've covered over 30 of the ceasefire now protests in New York and DC. We just covered the Assange protest today. All of this costs a lot of money, not to, paying the cameramen, paying Colin, paying Tina, Ron, John Farina, paying for hotels, flights, rent-a-cars. It all costs a lot of money, plus our monthly costs, including our broadcasting unit. Please, 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 if you can, sign up, statuscoup.com/join. We're trying to continue to do this the right way without any corporate fat cats funding us. I'd rather close down shop and close the lights before taking money from the very people destroying our country. So please, if you can, if you can't, I totally understand. But if you can, $5 a month is 16 cents a day. $10 a month is 33 cents a day. So please sign up if you can. And if you sign up before Thursday, you'll get a link to join our monthly members call. Now, Nancy Pelosi, you might group her in with Biden because she seems not to be all there with it either. Remember months ago, Steve, the AOC thing came out that AOC was talking at Pelosi and she was blaming Black Lives Matter was blaming Russia for everything under the sun. But Pelosi was interviewed. She made a really, really, really pants on fire claim about the U.S.'s role in the genocide in Gaza. Let's take a look.
If you don't like what Israel is doing, and the president has made it clear that some of what Israel is doing he doesn't like,
that's right.
and you go on supplying them with hardware to do those things, you own this operation every bit as much as they do, don't you?
No, we don't. We don't. We have always supported Israel as our national security friend, largely because it was in our interest to do so. Largely because it was in to do so. We had shared values that only democracy in the region. The behavior of Netanyahu is, in my view, inexcusable in terms of how it has affected the collateral damage to children and families and the rest. But nobody can take away the right of any country to defend itself that has been brutally attacked in that way.
Last week, the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, wondered aloud why the US isn't doing more to have its warnings taken seriously in Jerusalem. If you believe, he said, that too many people are being killed, maybe you should provide fewer arms in order to prevent so many people being killed. He's got a point, hasn't he?
Israel is very well equipped with weaponry. There's nothing that we have sent since October 7th that has contributed to this brutality. In the longer run, they're in a dangerous neighborhood, and we will continue to support Israel.
I don't know who that journalist was. Credit to him for asking good questions. I mean, this literally took me 30 seconds. This is the Wall Street Journal a week ago. U.S. plans to send weapons to Israel amid Biden push for ceasefire deal. The proposed arms delivery includes roughly 1,000 each of Mk-82 bombs, KMU 572 joint direct attack munitions that add precision guidance to the bombs. That was from Wall Street Journal. Then you got The Guardian. Gaza war puts U.S. extensive weapons stockpile in Israel under scrutiny. Long shrouded in secrecy, the warehouses, U.S. Warehouses in Israel with U.S. weaponry are part of an extensive but previously little-known stockpile now facing scrutiny as pressure mounts on the Biden administration over its support for Israel's bombardment of Gaza. The stockpile was first established in the 1980s to rapidly supply U.S. forces for any future Middle East conflicts. However, over time, Israel has been permitted in certain situations to draw from its extensive supplies. This one is from the Times of Israel, so an Israeli publication. Since the beginning of the war in October, the U.S. has provided Israel with approximately 21,000 units of precision-guided munition, about half of which has been used, according to a Wall Street Journal report. Some of those have been those 2,000-pound bombs that have been raining genocide. At this point, it's hard to even give you an accurate number, but I believe the number of children is hovering close to 15,000 dead. Overall, it looks like nearly 30,000 dead, as Jeremy Scahill has said. I believe the numbers are very underreported because how many poor souls are under rubble, not retrieved. But what does it say to you? I mean, she might not be the Speaker of the House anymore, but she's still basically the queen of the Democratic Party for all intents and purposes. Again, I can't get in her head. She's older. Not all old people compulsively lie, and not all old people are damaged cognitively, but she's obviously lying through her teeth there.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, I guess you could say this is what the Democratic Party is. And it's hard because it's like, I hate that this Band-Aid has to be ripped off for some people. People cannot see this for what it is. They cannot understand that you can literally say the truth about the Democrats. You can literally say the truth about the electoral system. You can literally say the truth about Donald Trump without being a Putin puppet or anything else. The fact is, Nancy Pelosi is fucking lying. The fact is that Joe Biden, without Congress's support, in many cases, just carte blanche, writing a check through his own discretion, has given support not only to Israel but to Ukraine as well, with, of course, support of Congress also. So it's fundamentally a lie to start with, but this is what your government, whether it be blue team or red team, this is what your government is doing. This is what our country is doing in your name, in all of our name, not your fucking tax dollars name, our name, because they're just spending money on this shit. They're spending it straight onto them. And they're doing it as if they're doing us a favor. The fact of the matter is that whether it's red team or blue team, you have got a genocidal government right here, right now, whitewashing the death. And when did this start? What was it? October 7th? I mean, you're looking at months of slaughter. And here we are now at the end of February. Joe Biden is suddenly taking an issue with Bibi's, genocide. Oh, he won't say genocide. He's a little out of control. She's taking a little bit too far, a little bit too much collateral damage. What the fuck is that? Sorry, I really am struggling not only with the whole concept of genocide, but the concept that people don't see it for what it is, and that they can't say it for what it is. They refuse to acknowledge that it's a fucking genocide. They refuse to acknowledge that the party in power is funding it. And they refuse to accept that Joe Biden, regardless of who's on the other side of that ticket, is literally funding genocide right before your eyes. This is what there's a great meme out there saying, if you wondered what you'd be doing during the Holocaust in Germany, you're doing it right now. And that's literally what's happening. We're literally part and parcel with the same thing. Just because we're not the one pulling the trigger doesn't mean we're not the one facilitating the trigger being pulled. And I refuse to allow anyone to tell me differently at this point.
You know, I don't want to say too much because I love my mother. Hope she's not watching. But, you know, I've been open. Her and I have had it out a couple times over the last few months. My father, too. They're both about as pro-Israel as you can get, especially my father. For years, I didn't really talk to them about Israel because what was the point? I wasn't going to change their mind, and let's focus on other things. But I said to my mom the other day, you know, forgetting everything, weren't you the one that taught me 2 wrongs don't make a right? I know some people are okay with what Hamas did on October 7th. You and I have disagreed on that. I don't approve of that. I understand the resistance and the hatred towards Israel, but I just, within me, I don't believe, you know, go after one set of innocents and, you know, for another. Even though I know Israel has left and the world have left Palestinians with very little other resource. With that said, I said to my mom, like, two things can be true. I mean, I want the hostages released. I am against you know, taking innocent people. But if you're against what happened on October 7th, how could you not be against with 15,000 children being slaughtered? I mean, that's just not cognitively or morally consistent. I won't, you know, get into too much about what my mom said, but I don't understand this mentality, even among the pro-Israel pack. I know it's kind of like it becomes a bit cultish in America and around the world, the being pro-Israel. But if you're Jewish, even if you're not religious, you know about the Holocaust. You were raised on what happened, never again. How do you look the other way when you're seeing not just the dead, but I mean, these images of little children with arms missing, half their face blown off? That is not justified because hostages were taken. 2 things could be true. We don't condone that, and we definitely don't condone this. I mean, it's very, to me, it's just morally simple. It's not complicated to be against this. And you cannot, I think another thing she said, Pelosi, in addition to lying, it's a lie. I mean, it's just a lie to call Israel a democracy at this point. How do you call it a democracy? I mean, before all this happened, their lunatic right-wing prime minister basically invalidated their version of the Supreme Court, severely weakened it against the will of the people. And I would argue most of their aggression towards Palestinians, Arab Israelis, is very, very against the principles of democracy, not to mention an occupation for the last 50 years. It's just, I'm really out of words. I mean, I don't cover foreign policy or imperialism as much as I do domestic rot here, but I don't know the answer. And I was talking to John Farina about it because he's covered, you know, at this point, over 30 protests in New York. And we've covered more of these ceasefire protests than any outlet, corporate or definitely corporate and independent. And at this point, I really don't think, I hate to say it, we'll keep covering it, I don't think they're going to do anything until what we always talk about, Steve. We have to have an economic movement in this country. These people that are protesting in New York and DC have to start boycotting. I'm not talking BDS. I'm talking like companies in America, Amazon, Walmart, corporate banking, anybody doing business with Israel at this point. You cannot stand here. And because if this continues, Netanyahu is not going to stop. He's already rejected deals to release all the hostages and say, we will end military action then. He's rejected that. So I don't think this is going to stop until the U.S. is forced to pull the check. And I don't think the U.S. is going to pull that check until the donors tell Biden or the next president, you have to stop funding this. And the only way the donors will stop that is if we hit their quarterly profits, hit their ability to do dividends and stock buybacks. That's unfortunately the way this country works.
Like, I want to lay something out on top of what you just said that I think is really important. I don't think most people think of it this way. And if they do, it's maybe deep in their brain. They don't really think of it and have it right at the forefront. But stopping people from being able to have food is violence. Stopping people from being able to have shelter is violence. Stopping people from having water is violence. Giving them poison water, like in Flint, is violence. Being able to see people literally laying in the street and not taking care of them is violence. Okay. So when you look at what's happened to the Palestinians over all these years, to say that it just was when they shot someone or put a bomb out there or whatever, that's violence, I think fundamentally misses. And we've got to keep austerity right in the focus. Every time they do these things, they cut off much needed supplies for someone. It's like sanctions of sorts, the same thing. It's another weapon of war. These are not bullets, but it's the same kind of effect. It still kills, it still destroys. And until we start realizing that economic terrorism is terrorism, every time they stop food and sustenance, that's terrorism. We're not going to ever stop those sorts of things from happening. We've got it in our head that the only kind of violence is when someone pulls a gun and shoots someone or a bomb falls. This is violence, and that was done to the Palestinians long before October 7th, and it's been done to U.S. citizens, the poor especially, since the dawn of time. Until we start looking at that as violence, we're not going to take a serious. That's why I always say you can't be pro-peace, anti-war, etc., if you are not economically fighting that war against austerity as well. It is the number one killer, not only in the U.S., but around the world. And I think that you should see that as the first blow, if you will, to the Palestinians, not any of the bombs and stuff like that. See the terrorism by depriving them of basic needs as the ultimate first shot.
Steve, you just gave me a perfect segue to my next guest, but I'm going to let you go because I know you got a kid that's a little sick right now.
Yes,
please promote all your great things and where people can find you.
All right, please check out our podcast. It comes out released. It's an audio podcast, so you're not going to see faces. You can just listen to it while you're running or sitting around the house smoking a joint. Whatever it is you're doing, you can listen. It's great. It comes out every Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The other thing is on Tuesday evenings, we have something called Macro and Chill, which is a webinar where we get together on a Zoom and we talk about the podcast, develop a community that's really important to us. That's Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. And then coming up soon as my life gets back together with my poor mom, I'll be back to Monday, Wednesday, Fridays doing the Rogue Scholar and maybe even a late night thing. So with that, thank you, Jordan. I'm always here on Tuesdays as long as time permits. So take it easy,
Absolutely.
Everybody. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Everybody do Macro and Chill, 8 o'clock tonight. Be there. All right. Thanks, Steve.
Take care. Bye-bye.
As Steve said, withholding food is violence, which brings us to our next guest.
Hey, how's it going?
Joined by Nick from the group Houston Food Not Bombs. I don't know if people are aware because I don't really see the mainstream media giving a damn. These fine folks feeding the homeless in Houston were being ticketed. Yes, they were receiving tickets for feeding the homeless in Houston to the point where you had to go to court. Fortunately, there's some justice in America. Tell people who don't know when this started happening that, you guys were being ticketed and what the court decision was.
Yeah, so in 2012, the mayor at the time, Anise Parker, along with all of the Democrats except for one on city council, passed this new law against sharing food. You have to have permission from the city to share food. We fought it as much as we could at the time, but it passed. That being said, they didn't enforce it at all until March of last year when the mayor at the time, Sylvester Turner, started ticketing us. So it'd be, we usually have like between 3 and 15 volunteers out there, a bunch of food and a long line of people, hungry people coming to get it. And we're putting food on the plates, and they would just come out twice a week, every week, on Mondays and Wednesdays, and just ticket the person who was handing the plates to people, to the point where we got like 96 tickets. I think we almost got to 100 when all of a sudden this federal judge restrained them from doing anymore. There's a restraining order. They're not allowed to ticket us. So yeah, it was this incredible change that happened in the federal courts. And
what changed? You said that this was on the books for about a decade, but they didn't start implementing it until like a year or two ago. Why did they start a year or two ago implementing?
Yeah, so I mean, all of this comes down to real estate. Real estate doesn't want to see homeless people around their stuff. Real estate controls city council, controls the mayors. It's all real estate's decisions. They actually sit on the boards of all of the homeless agencies and stuff too. So they're behind the scenes. So, but we don't know. I mean, we're kind of, it's anyone's guess. Did the former mayor get a call from someone at the library being like, you know, you have to do something about the homeless, and he decided to do it this way? Did he have a personal vendetta against us because we kept defying him, telling us to stop sharing food? You know, he didn't go after any other groups that are sharing food in the streets, just us. And we're at the library. It's a very visible place. It happens to be directly across the street from City Hall. So, yeah, we're right there. And yeah, and so we have all these municipal court dates. So I've gone in for like, I don't know, 7 or 8 times, and they just kind of reset us. They're like, the prosecutors don't really know how to deal with us. And they're you know, it's Class C misdemeanor. So they're like traffic prosecutors. They're not well-versed in constitutional law. So they just can't kind of keep kicking the can down the road. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, a lot of us are leftists and anarchists and stuff like that. Democrats have never come out for us. There was like one Democrat on the city council when the law passed that voted against it, and all the other ones voted with the mayor. And similarly, like this judge that, you know, gave us this huge federal court victory for freedom of speech is on the Republican side. So yeah, that's a strange bedfellow.
You know what this kind of reminds me of? I mean, it's not the same thing, but all these liberals and MSNBC got their panties in a twist, rightfully so, when the Georgia law criminalized passing out water on voting lines. If you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, that literally is in this season. Larry David gets arrested for passing out water on a voting line in Georgia. And obviously, it's a voter suppression tactic. It's inhumane. What's the difference? You're going to, maybe it's a civil infraction, but you're going to be penalizing. And if you keep ticketing people, they add up, I'm sure, the fines. With feeding people, what kind of dystopian shit is that? Secondly, I'm glad you brought this up because this is kind of going on all over America. I've done some reporting tours just focusing on homelessness, poverty, etc. Real estate is the biggest cartel out there buying our local governments. Literally, real estate developers are sitting city council members in many places, possibly in Houston too. They're buying off Democratic mayors, they're buying off Republican and everything in between. Because the truth is, I don't call it gentrification. I call it economic terrorism. Sure, we all want, you know, cool restaurants, bars, this and that, but not at the price of pushing everybody out, including, you know, unhoused people. Can you kind of talk about Houston is one of the most gentrified areas in America?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's, you know, everywhere that I'm from New York and I live in Houston, and you know, there's successive waves of gentrification, colonization, whatever you want to call it. Things become more colonized than they were. And there's a lockdown on public space in general. Occupy definitely got a bunch of mayors and people thinking like, what can we do to stop this kind of thing from people gathering in public? So there's that going on. And, you know, I think there is a lot of, I mean, I understand why people don't want a bunch of homeless people around where they live or where they work, you know, I mean, not really where they work, but I guess more where they live. Like if there was, you know, a ton of homeless people encamped in front of my place, like it would be an issue to me. Like, it's just a question of who do you blame, right? I don't blame the homeless people no matter what. Like if that situation was uncomfortable for me, I would blame capitalism. I would blame real estate prices. I would blame, you know, rich people, the system, whatever. That would be the last thing on my mind, to blame homeless people. And that's been one of the coolest things about this whole struggle that we've been through since March when they started ticketing us, is that the media has not really taken any anti kind of homeless stances. They've portrayed us pretty sympathetically, and the city has been portrayed so unsympathetically that this was unbelievable to me. One of our volunteers went to court and actually got a trial. They were like, okay, you get a trial. Like, you know, the rest of us just keep getting rescheduled, but this one judge is like, let's get this over with, let's do it. So they brought in a panel of like, I don't know, 17 jurors, and they only had to find 3 that were willing to kind of enforce the law. Are you open, without even hearing the facts of the case, they do that screening and they're like, are you willing to give a $500 penalty to a person for sharing food? And all of them were like, no, they had to dismiss the whole jury panel. So that case didn't go to trial because they couldn't even find a jury that was open to enforcing it. And then, unfortunately, that just meant that she got reset again, and they're going to, you know, ostensibly look for another jury. But, you know, pending now the outcome of this federal case, which has put all of that on hold. So, yeah, so the general public has been super supportive. The catch, though, is that they're super supportive of our side on this particular law because it penalizes volunteerism. But they're not necessarily on the side of homeless people for these laws that directly penalize the homeless, right? So there are laws that you can't have your stuff in a box that's over 3 by 3 feet in size, that you can't have a tent, that you can't lie down on the sidewalk between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m., that you can't panhandle in certain areas. Like there's a bunch of anti-homeless laws. Those don't get the same sympathetic coverage, or they don't get any coverage at all, actually. So, yeah, because people find it easier to identify with volunteers, I guess.
To me, it really connects to what Steve and I were talking about earlier. I mean, at the end of the day, the federal government can print money out of its ass. You know, we do. State and local cannot. You know, you have a budget, you have to balance the budget, and most states are broke because we sold all our jobs to other countries, which is a whole nother story. But anyway, the point being, we are every other day, you know, 60 billion for Ukraine, 95 billion for Ukraine and Israel, now Taiwan, 800 to 1,000 military bases all over the world. It would cost, you know, conservative estimate, $25 billion to house all the homeless. And forget that for a second. They wouldn't need to be fed if we invested in more safe, clean shelters. A lot of houseless individuals I've met, they don't want to go to the shelters because there is sexual assaults that go on at the shelters. There are other unsafe things that go on, and they actually feel safer on the streets than they do in the shelters. I doubt the media is covering those things. I'm glad that they're at least defending you guys, but there is a lot of things we can do to eradicate homelessness, or at least, you know, provide more resources. Not only that, but mental health, PTSD treatment. There's a lot of people who are homeless for a variety of reasons, not just poverty, but, you know, trauma and many other things. And to be clear, you don't see this number much in mainstream media. Nationally, homelessness went up 12% last year, and that's probably an undercount.
Well, that brings up the issue of, like, I mean, I'm going to out cynic you. So if you actually give that money,
very hard to do.
Yeah, but if you had that money allocated to Houston, what would happen to it is what's happening to it right now, because we're actually getting hundreds of millions of dollars every year from these Obama era grants from HUD that are still coming in, and they're just getting divvied up by these shelters that pay their CEOs, you know, $561,000 a year, and the people who play ball with real estate tend to get that grant money. And so I would say that a fair amount of it is being squandered. And the way that they play ball with real estate is they say, we'll put our shelter in a really inconvenient place out in a poor neighborhood where the rich people don't have to worry about it. And then, you know, they get the money channeled to them. We're an all volunteer organization, so it's very easy for us to, you know, kind of not get sucked into that. Like, there's no one saying like you're going to lose your grant money if you talk about real estate or whatever. So we can kind of say whatever we want. But the big homeless agencies and the small ones, they're insanely corrupt. Like the previous mayor, Sylvester Turner, just look him up. Sylvester Turner, affordable housing scandal or whatever. He just channeled a bunch of money that was supposed to go into affordable housing to his former business partner, who did a very inefficient job of creating housing compared to all the other bids. But he didn't even, you know, it's not like he got impeached over it or something. So yeah, it would be nice if all that money that's being spent on war was being spent domestically, but you have to also say, like, it has to be spent with some civilian, like, oversight and not, you know, this rampant corruption, because like anything can be, you know, auctioned off and monetized. There's a market for homeless people. Like, if you are a shelter, you have to prove that you have this many homeless people and you check them off. They have a thing called the Homeless Management Information System that helps them with their grant allocation. The other thing that they need for their grant money is to prove every year that Houston is reducing homelessness. So according to them, the Coalition for the Homeless, they've reduced homelessness in Houston by 80% over the last 12 years. That's nonsense. Like, they definitely have not reduced homelessness by that, but on paper they have, because that's what they need to get their grant money.
I should have asked this before. What exactly is the mayor or, you know, whatever politicians supported this in the first place. What is their rationale for doing so? Do they think homeless people are going to use the food as a weapon? What are they saying?
Right. I mean, it definitely shifts. The first one that they hit us with is that there's an epidemic of food poisoning in the streets. And we're like, oh my God, like where? And they're like, well, it's just anecdotal. And we're like, okay, well, where's the anecdotes from? No info on it. It was just something that they made up. And so that was the first one. And kind of ironically, so this in this trial before the federal judge, they put someone from the health department up on the stand who had been working in the health department for decades. And we've been in the streets for decades. And she was saying, oh, health, concerns are super important. And we're like, yeah, y'all don't pay any attention to health concerns in the shelter, but with us, yeah, okay, you want to focus on health concerns. And then our lawyers from the Texas Civil Rights Project just hit her up and they're like, okay, well, do you have some data? How many complaints have there been about food not bombs over the last 20 years? And she said 0. And I think the lawyers were kind of risking it because I doubt that they actually knew that what that number would be. I wouldn't know what that number would be, but she said 0 on the stand. So it's like there are Michelin, restaurants that have, health concerns that have been raised in the last 20 years. So like, we have this federal court testimony from the health department that we've had 0 complaints. And, we share food with 50 to 150 people 4 nights a week. And we did so all through COVID. Some incredible women in our group held it down all through COVID. I wasn't going out there and they were, and yeah. But the city, and there was a recent freeze and it was the same thing. Our volunteers were out there saving lives and the people from the city were not even answering the phone. The mayor's homeless czar was like, sorry, like we can't do anything.
I think we need to look at this from a broader perspective. You said a lot of you are leftists. They're trying to criminalize a lot of things that back in the day were just good old citizenship. They're calling environmental protesters eco-terrorists. They're trying to, criminalize passing out food. They're trying to criminalize passing out water. Republican legislatures are doing this. In this case, Democratic folks. So people need to understand, all these fundraising emails you're getting and all the media hysteria about our democracy is at risk. Our democracy has been at risk for a while because we don't really have one. Sure, we're not Russia. Like if you go out in the street and protest, you won't immediately, be sent to jail. But a lot of the things that are supposed to be enshrined in the Constitution for us are being discarded, including, freedom of speech, First Amendment, and things like this, all because of money. And I think you're spot on. You don't really need evidence to know why they would be doing this. It's the real estate developers. It's the real estate lobby. In a lot of cases, the main mechanisms these cities have for investment are donations and money from real estate developers and, oil companies and financial companies. So it's kind of like they need to keep these people happy. And you want to know something? Sure. I get it. A lot of these NIMBY folks, not in my neighborhood, don't want, homeless people everywhere. But I think, Nick, you said it right. The reaction should be, you don't want them, where your kids are playing or right in front of your house. Then you better get down to city council and demand your officers do something about this for affordable housing, safe and clean shelters, mental health care. It's not the people's fault. It's the government's fault.
Yeah, it's crazy. They definitely, we got some of the mayor's emails came out in a Freedom of Information request, and it's pretty interesting. So the library is saying to him, hey, we're having a problem with a lot of homeless people coming in because of the heat, which is true. It is the only air-conditioned building with bathrooms that they can go in that's a public building, so of course they're going to go there. The mayor hasn't provided any other places. The mayor responds, yeah, I'm going to try to do something to get food not bombs out of there. They even said it was the heat, and his response is like, oh, it must be food not bombs. We share food after the library is closed. We share food near the library because there's already a lot of homeless people there because they're allowed to go there, and there's not other public buildings for them. So like the mayor is trying to say that it's our fault that there's homeless people going to the library. I would say, well, it seems like it's your fault for not providing other public buildings where they can hang out when the heat is 110 degrees and humidity is like at 100%. And we have a brand new mayor. He's also a Democrat. Whitmire just came in. So a lot of this stuff is, kind of on the previous mayor. And I hope they'll they'll leave it at that. They'll just say, oh yeah, the previous mayor messed up, but who knows? There's a million other ways they could, go after volunteers. There's a million other ways they can go after homeless people. They have a lot of tools at their disposal, and we don't have that many, but it is a moment for celebration to like win this lawsuit. And, some of the lawyers that wanted to take on this lawsuit, they had told us, your best bet in Texas, like go for a freedom of religion argument. Are some of your volunteers religious? Like, yeah, some of our volunteers are religious. Yeah, go with that. Texas Civil Rights Project decided to go on a freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, kind of attack, and they won on it. So they won on the, they won it for all the right reasons, and it upholds, a really important right. And it's partially because the city was just so idiotic about what they're doing. They basically created one place in the entire city where it's legal to give out food to the homeless, and that happens to be a police parking lot. And that just kind of left them really vulnerable to lose this lawsuit.
And lastly, tell people more about Houston Food Not Bombs. And I mean, I'd be remiss not to ask what you think about we're dropping 2,000-pound bombs over Gaza. We're sending more weapons to Ukraine. Obviously, the media and politicians seem to be very focused on saving all sorts of people everywhere else, or not
saving them.
Not saving. But in this case,
yeah, I mean,
let the homeless starve.
Yeah, people connect with it. They understand, like, young people don't buy this nonsense of, we need this money to, spend on bombs. But it's very difficult. I'm a long time anti-Zionist, Jewish atheist type. I've been warning about this stuff for decades, and like, it just seems like all this impunity is part of the system. If we can get away with Iraq, maybe they can get away with this. We just keep loosening all these aspects of oversight and democracies so much that, genocide actually becomes possible, along with, all of this propaganda. I mean, I don't know. I went to high school in New York in the 80s, and like, I didn't have a lot of experience with Israel propaganda, but they, with the birthright tours in the 90s, they started propagandizing every Jewish kid. And I don't think Houston has one anti-Zionist or non-Zionist synagogue, community center. I don't think the Holocaust Museum has said a word about this genocide. So it's extremely disappointing. And like I said, I'm pretty cynical too, but I did not expect, when I read that 1.8% of Jewish Israelis think that the government has gone too far in Gaza, man, that's just like, that is even still shocking to me. And of course, like, all of these things, like the war economy, it destroys everything. I think that, violence goes up in the streets, violence goes up in the family, creating homelessness, domestic abuse, all these things, like, they resonate with the war mentality. All these people coming back from fighting a war are going to have a very different mentality, very racist mentality. And so, yeah, it's an insane tragedy. And it doesn't feel at all rewarding to be able to say, oh, I warned you. Like, so what? Like, yeah, we warned you, but it doesn't matter. Like, we feel very helpless. But yeah, we're organizing. There's people in city council right now talking out to demand that the city sign on to a ceasefire. There's been incredible Palestine organizing. So that's going on. Houston Food Not Bombs. We're in the streets 4 nights a week sharing food, and wherever you are in the world, there might be a Food Not Bombs chapter near you. So check it out. They're all over the planet, getting together, sharing vegetarian and vegan food and opposing war for decades. And it's a really simple way to get involved. People who volunteer with us, they can just spend a couple hours a week, pick one day that they like, cook a pot of beans and come out and share it. It's very easy to plug in. And but yeah, of course, we're on all the social media and everything. We have a donation page. We had raised a lot of money to help us pay these tickets, and then we had to pay a bunch of money to the city. To the federal court, because they said, okay, well, preliminary injunction, the cops can't write you any more tickets, but in case the city wins on appeal, or in case the city ends up winning at the end of this, we have to have $25,000 from y'all in case they have damages. So we had to come up with bond money. So It's only because of all the people who've donated to us that we're even able to do something like that. So, yeah, I mean, people from all over the country have been supporting us, and it's just been, you know, it's been really affirming. Like leftists, we don't win too many battles, you know. So
on one end, a win is a win, but on another end, it's kind of sickening that in America you have to go to court to feed the homeless.
Yeah. And in another way, like even when you win, they still come back, right? The stadium vote doesn't lose, so they just spend more money and put it on the ballot the next time. Like in our case, they didn't succeed going after us this way. Hey, there's other ways. So yeah, la lucha sigue.
Well, I appreciate you following up with me. I encourage everyone in Houston or not in Houston, foodnotbombs.org. Chip in if you can, because, you know, obviously they got to pay for the food to feed the homeless.
That's the other thing.
You
we
don't
have to spend a penny. Like the city's spending $9 a meal on these boxes that have a miserable like chicken wing and some macaroni in it. All our stuff is donated from restaurants and supermarkets and individuals.
Well, there you
our
go.
plate is like beautiful. Free is a way better way to feed people. I would way rather have one of our plates than one of those plates the police are passing out.
Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, so get involved if you can. Go to their website, and I'm glad just won this victory.
Thanks so much for staying in contact. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care. So that wraps us up today. Reminder, Thursday night, if you're not yet a member, sign up as a Status Coup member so you can join our members call. That will be at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. We need you. We need to sign up more members if we're going to continue funding our on-the-ground reporting. I am planning on going to Flint if everything goes right this weekend. Actually planning on shooting a bit of a mini documentary on the 10 years of the Flint water crisis that we could release in April when it actually is the anniversary. So I'm planning on going there potentially this weekend. I'm just trying to line up everything with interviews and everything else. This will be, are you ready for this? This will be my 20th. I cannot believe it. 20th reporting trip to Flint, most of which has come with Status Coup. First couple were with the Young Turks, but the majority of my trips to Flint have been thanks to you, the Status Coup viewers. You are why we've been able to keep this ongoing crisis in the news, at least a little bit. And the more people I talk to be clear, this still is an urgent crisis in Flint. And I've put a lot of my time into this, but I do it because I know the people really care and want to know what is going on there and want justice for the people of Flint. And I don't want to leave it to the corporate media on April 25th, which is the 10-year anniversary, to whitewash what's really happening and make it seem like this was some, tragedy long in our rear view, but is now in a recovery. It is not. There's still water problems in Flint. People are dying. It is a major cancer cluster now. They have a serious cancer surge, and it's not from the weather. It's from the toxic water that poisoned them. So again, I'll be going there this weekend. It will mostly be not live because I'm going to be there recording stuff to make into a documentary. We'll probably do at least 1 or 2 live streams while I'm there. But please, if you can, again, I hate to be a broken record, and I know a lot of you do not have the means. But if you do have, I'm just asking for $5 to $10 a month. There's a lot of outlets out there sending emails asking for money. Support, who you choose. But I believe we obviously do something different, which is go out there on the ground. And it costs a lot of money. It would be a lot easier to do this, by just taking money from some rich person who wants to water us down. We've chosen not to do that, but it's expensive. Got to pay me, got to pay Colin, got to pay Lewis, got to pay John, got to pay Tina, got to pay Ron. At a certain point, we just don't have any more money. And I don't want to have to cut people. I don't want to have to cut things. But at the moment, we're not growing the way we need to grow. So if you can, please sign up, statuscoup.com/join. We don't take a cent from corporations. We don't take a cent from the corporate donors that fund the Democrats, the Republicans, the banks, the oil companies, the real estate, pharma. Our money, our funding is from you. If you're already a member, I kindly ask you if you can make a donation. We'll probably do another like GoFundMe campaign soon. But if you're already a member, please sign up. Donate. That's statuscoup.com/donate. That's another great way. You can donate any amount. We really appreciate any donation. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on Status Coup. Oh, Super Chats. Sorry. Syed signed up as a new Status Coup member. Thank you, Syed. Appreciate it. You will get the link now that you're a member. You will get the link to join our members call on Thursday. President Super Chat, $5. Define violence as it relates to blocking access to food, because people won't understand that use of the term. I agree. That's a good point. Those are all the Super Chats I see. So thank you. And again, we will be, Ron will be on tomorrow, and Thursday will be our members call. We still also have content from Lewis's trip to East Palestine that we have to release. So we have other interviews Lewis did on the ground from East Palestine. So that will be coming up soon. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.